Today's scripture reading brings us to Proverbs chapter 12. Proverbs chapter 12 continues along the same theme of varied thoughts concerning wisdom and virtue, righteousness versus wickedness. You will see all throughout this chapter the word but. That is because as you read through here, you have one thought here and then but, and something kind of opposite that finishes out the thought. For example, verse number 1, whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof is brutish. So you have one end of the spectrum, but the other end of the spectrum is how it's laid out. It's on a variety of topics all throughout this chapter, and I just wanted to touch on a few of them in our studies today for devotion purposes. Verse number 1 was one of them, and let me read it one more time. Whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge. It's very easy for us in the flesh to fall into the we know it all type mentality. Now, we won't come out and say, I know it all, but we certainly act that way a lot. We will recoil at the thought of someone correcting us, at the thought of someone saying, hey, this is what you're doing, but you shouldn't be doing that and you should be doing this. Our flesh just rejects that. We don't want to feel inadequate. We don't want to feel like we're not quite doing what we should be doing. So naturally, in our flesh, we don't want instruction. The only time we ever really want instruction is when we are at our wit's end and we want to figure out what to do next. But we don't ever want someone just coming and giving us some type of instruction, especially when it's unsolicited. However, the reason why correction needs to be spoken is because you are doing something wrong, and that's what reproof is. The latter part of that verse, but he that hateth reproof is brutish. That word brutish means stupid. So what this proverb is telling us, whoso loveth instruction, loveth knowledge, but he that hateth reproof, hateth correction, is stupid. Let's not be stupid, right? Let's make sure that we are open to instruction, and we will take criticism, we will take reproof in the manner in which it should be taken, and that is hopefully for our benefit, that we can evaluate the situation and then impart it in our life. Now, I have another verse that kind of plays off of this here in a minute, and you'll see that in a second. Verse number 10 is for all you animal lovers out there. Verse number 10 says, a righteous man regardeth the life of his beast, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. This is one of those verses that is by comparison type verse. And it is, your first example is one that cares for and regards, and in other words, has consideration for the life of his beast, his own animal. And then the other end of the spectrum is the tender mercies, the kindness of the wicked are cruel by comparison. And make sure you note the delineation in this verse. The righteous man regardeth the life of his beast. That's speaking about a kindness that a human would show to an animal. But there's not that aspect of it in the second part of this. But the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. In other words, the tender mercies, the kindness that the wicked would show not just to animals, but unto humans, are cruel by comparison. Okay? And in verse number 15 is another verse that is regarding counsel. It says, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. And this is the verse that kind of goes right along with verse number 1. He whoso loveth instruction loveth knowledge, but he which hateth reproof is brutish. Verse 15, the way of the fool is right in his own eyes. In other words, whatever he thinks is right, he just continues on doing it. That's a fool. But he that hearkeneth unto counsel, he that listeneth to counsel is wise. And this verse reminded me of those men that would drive and they'd get lost. They refused to stop for instructions, or refused to stop for directions. I don't know why men get a bad rap for that. I'm assuming that by and large it is a true statement. It never was for me. I didn't mind stopping and asking for directions. I hated losing time. If I was driving somewhere, I personally hated losing a bunch of time just wandering around trying to figure things out. I would much rather have stopped for directions, but that's just me. And then lastly, I want to look at verses 17 and 22 together. 17 says, "He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness is deceit." And then kind of flipped around is, "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but he that deal truly are his delight." And so both of these verses are comparing the truth with lies. And in verse number 17, "He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness." We would show forth righteousness when we speak truth. And it's such an important thing to consider in this day and age, with all of this trans propaganda being shoved down our throats, shoved down the throats unto our children, going through the school systems, and all of this. We need to understand that we are to speak truth, not simply cater to all the lies. Man, I refuse to call a she a he and a he a she. And so should you. Why? Because that's a lie straight out of hell. And that is diminishing the authority that God had when he created that human being by playing into that fantasy in which they are perpetrating upon themselves and upon those around them that interacts with them. We should speak truth. Why? Because it is righteous to speak truth. It is abomination to speak lies. All right, so that's Proverbs chapter 12. A lot of good stuff here. I'm sure that as you read through this, some of these other verses might speak unto you. That's the way God works. You can read this chapter many times, but then depending on what's going on in your life, certain things will kind of jump out at you. The Lord is good like that. He's good all the time. That's going to do it for our study here tonight. Proverbs chapter 12. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow.